The third great synthesis, a prophecy for the human family. I would like to share with you a prophecy I have been shown and have carried with me over the past 30 years since I first came in contact with the visionary Native American elders who came into my life to bring me what I was seeking, the missing pieces of the prevailing paradigm that was driving the choices and behaviors and systems of the industrial post-war era I was born into in 1946 here in Brunswick. Having been born a Baxter and coming to understand my ancestors' commitment to all life, the poor, the animals, the women, the water, and the earth, with service to others and extraordinary philanthropic generosity, I knew I was living in a world out of balance. I got it in the early 90s that the indigenous people are carrying clues to the true nature of the universe for humanity, and that there would come a day when we would come together and bring the gifts from each race and create a whole new way of being on the planet that has never been here before. I see big pictures, and I see the coming of peace on earth. In my reality, everything, absolutely everything, serves the coming of peace on earth as we bring heaven to earth. I was told in an ayahuasca journey, your name is Eagle Woman, and it is your job to fly very high and report back all that you see. That is my job. I'm a reporter. Another one of my jobs is the US of A, and the realization of the promise this nation made to the world in its freedom documents: liberty, justice, equality, and abundance for all. This all ties together in what I have called the three great syntheses in the evolution of the American mind, spirit, and democracy, which has taken 4 centuries to reach this point in the process of becoming truly free, with a deep understanding of our oneness with all of creation, where justice is a given and everyone enjoys more abundance than we can fathom at this time. These 3 great syntheses began with the first great synthesis during the 54 years of peace and friendship between the Mayflower Pilgrims and the Pokanoket Wampanoag in what is now Plymouth, Massachusetts, whom they met in the spring of 1621 after the first devastating winter when scurvy and flu took out half of the 102 passengers. This included my ancestors, Alice and William Mullins, and their son Joseph, leaving behind an 18-year-old orphan girl, Priscilla, who married John Alden and became America's first couple, spawning 11 children, so there are lots of us descendants. And there's another one sitting there, and probably a bunch of you in here, who knows? The Pilgrims, or Separatists, vastly different in intent and vision from the Puritans, who were to arrive 10 years later in 1630 at Cape Ann, were seeking to build a society based on freedom of conscience, the freedom to act according to our direct connection with our highest selves. They were this nation's original spiritual activists. They committed treason in England by standing up to the King of England and refusing to attend the Church of England, and for creating their own covenanted church. 4 months after their arrival on American soil, they were met by the Massasoit Osamequin, with whom they crafted a peace treaty that was to last 54 years. Archaeological evidence has proven that there was significant interchange between the 2 cultures in their homes and gathering places. In fact, when Edward Winslow, who was the ambassador to the native people, was asked how dare he come so often and so far into Indian country, he said, "Where there is love, there is no fear. And for mine own part, my heart is so upright towards you, I am fearless to come amongst you. You may find this in a little book called Good News from New England, and one called Mort's Relation, journals that were published in 1624 at the time. So this isn't history being written by victors, this is people experiencing life and reporting accordingly. And you can go on mayflowerhistory.com, and they're available as PDFs if you're interested in going to source material. It's very important to go to source material if you're interested in history, accurate history. Andrew and I have lectured on this extensively, which you can find on our websites, thetrustfrequency.net and first50years.us. So this is our gig, and we've been on Zoom globally speaking about this, because the origin story of a nation is key to its psychological makeup. And our origin story is shrouded in misconception and misunderstanding. And there's a gem sitting there, which is this peace and friendship and spiritual alignment between the Pilgrims and the natives. The second great synthesis, well, I just want to say that I guess I mentioned the spiritual alignment. What I saw was this, because the native people live according to their creator-based understanding and connection. And this is what the Pilgrims were responding to themselves when they stood up to the King of England and said, hey, guess what? We don't have to go to your church. God didn't intend us to be at your church. God intended us to be in direct connection with him ourselves, not through all this rigmarole that you're forcing upon us. So the second great synthesis was when aspects of the great law of the Iroquois were incorporated into the United States Constitution. The great peacemaker Daganoweda had come to the warring tribes of the Iroquois in the 1200s or so, and had brought a higher vision to them called the Great Law, which showed them how they might come together in a confederacy and maintain their autonomy as different-sized tribes. When Ben Franklin came in contact with the Iroquois leaders in the mid-1700s, and saw this structure, he drafted the Albany Plan for bringing the 13 colonies together to become a union against threats that were becoming problematic for the individual colonies. The Iroquois chiefs were invited to the Continental Congress. This influence of the Great Law on the Constitution is controversial. There are people that don't want this to be a fact, and they do stuff to discredit it. And also, there are people that say the whole Constitution came from the Great Law. So it depends on your point of view and what you want to put your attention on. And what I say is it's pretty obvious that there was a lot of connection and communication. So it's pretty obvious that there was influence, and these ideas were a melding that became the Constitution. So, yeah. And now we're in the midst of the third great synthesis. Climate change has driven the Western world to look to the indigenous peoples and their connection to the earth and the cosmos to contribute to possible solutions to the crises. The new physics, the unified physics of Nassim Haramein, Dr. Jude Currivan, Dr. Bruce Lipton, Greg Braden, the HeartMath Institute, and others are going beyond the quantum physics brought forth by Einstein, Niels Bohr, David Bohm, and others to show us that we are not only connected with all that is, we are all that is. This is the knowing and connections that has been carried by the indigenous people for humanity. They carry a reverence for the sacredness and oneness of all of creation that is in the essence of all indigenous ways and knowing. Science can prove the oneness, but it cannot prove the sacredness. That comes from our hearts and the love we carry there. The reductionist scientific paradigm of Newton and Descartes in the 1500s and 1600s separated us from our hearts and the rest of creation. It turned the universe into a dead, purposeless place of fear, scarcity, and separation. It was the final evolutionary step in thousands of years of responses to the low vibration energy that was dominant on the earth and influenced all races, white, yellow, black, and red, to ignore our essence and to play out war, domination, and competition. Humanity's past has not been a pretty picture. Now, however, as the earth transitions into a higher frequency and more information becomes available, we are coming to understand that humanity is a key player in the evolution of cosmic consciousness, and that everything we do, say, think, and feel are felt and known throughout the cosmos. We discover that we have a responsibility for what we feed into the collective consciousness that is all that is. As we open our hearts, as a result of this knowledge and the energies available to us, we come to align with the deepest aspirations of all of humanity, what I call our pan-indigenousness. That thread that ties the heart of humanity together with a vision of a world in balance. We align with the following principles found in the essence of the ways of the indigenous peoples of the world. Sharing versus hoarding or saving. Concern for the common good versus individualism at the expense of the common good. Cooperation versus competition. Concern for the future impacts of present action versus instant gratification. Respect and reverence for all of life versus dominance of concern for profit. Trust in the love of a higher power manifested in all action versus fear and doubt. Living in balance with the rhythms of creation. Living in balance with the rhythms of life versus being driven by a man-made concept of time. Understanding the interrelatedness of all things and all actions versus separation. Understanding and trusting abundance versus fear of scarcity. An understanding of the co-creative power of thought versus random coincidence. Equality between all aspects of life versus human dominance. Incorporation of the metaphysical into physical reality versus bound to the limits of physical reality. I will close by saying there is a new energy available on earth which supports the manifestation of the infinite balance, abundance, and unconditional love that are at the foundation of universal law. Individuals are beginning to experience these in their lives, which step by step influences them to make new choices on how they live day by day. Spontaneously, trust replaces fear. Ease replaces struggle. Serenity replaces tension. Generosity replaces hoarding. Abundance replaces scarcity. Unity replaces separation. New systems develop. New relationships replace outmoded ways of being. An understanding of the interconnectedness and sacredness of all things begins to emerge. It is in this way that true peace and freedom will come to prevail on earth. Thank you. I just have to tell you, I wrote the last part in 1995. And it's on a sheet that's available as a pickup there. And the pan-indigenousness was in 2001. So it's happening. Trust it, know it, feel it,